Good afternoon, evening, or morning, and welcome to EST, the podcast for established church leaders. My name is Josh King.
My name is Sam, and I changed my shirt.
You did change your shirt. Yeah. The magic of production.
So for those who are watching on YouTube, and I'm sure there's some that like binge watch on YouTube. It's
Yeah.
like Sam's got a different shirt and a different hat on, but Josh has kept the same clothes on.
For 3 weeks.
Yeah, well, we're doing 3 episodes back to back to back, recording them back to back to back, which usually we do 2. Today we're doing 3. And I brought a change of clothes. I don't know why I did, but I should have told you to change your clothes. But yeah, you're still in the same shirt.
Fine. It's fine. I will say that between 2 of the episodes, I got a glass of water or my bottle of water, and when I opened it, it spit all over my shirt. So there was one episode where my shirt was a little different.
I didn't even notice. Did not even notice.
No one did. All right.
Hey, you know who you need to notice?
Church teams.
Church teams. Yes.
Yeah.
Sponsor of the show. Very grateful for their support. They enable us to do this to provide it free to you. So thank you, Boyd Pelly. Thank you, church teams. They have just about, if it's software related, they've got it. And this is what I love about church teams. Not only do they serve small churches and large churches well together, they've kind of got it. They have a full slate of software offerings. So, check-in, texting, online giving, scheduling, groups, they really do it all. So go to est.church. They've got an offer that they've been allowing our listeners to have. Very grateful for that. 2 months free. You fill out the form. They'll follow up with you. They will help you understand exactly what you need. So go to est.church, check out church teams, and thank you, church teams, for sponsoring the show.
As always, thank you so much. So this is going to be a fun topic because it pushes against the grain, right? How so?
Yeah, and I think you're going to see more of this, not less. In the coming years. So bigger is not better when it comes to churches. For so long, and you and I have kind of mentioned this on some previous episodes, we thought let's do a whole episode around this idea. For many years, decades in the United States, North American church, let's just say that, there was this idea that, hey, put in your time at a smaller church, kind of prove yourself, get your feet beneath you, get your experience, get some good sermons going. And, if you don't mess that up too much, then, you'll get another church that calls, mid-sized church. You'll get to go from bivocational to full-time. You start having kids, and then, you'll see a level of success, or you just don't mess it up. And then, another church will open up and you'll get to go to an even larger church. And maybe one day, even a mega church will call you. And that's kind of been the unspoken dream, right? If not just outright spoken about. It's kind of right there, just beneath the surface. With it, the grass is always greener. I'm looking to go to a bigger church, and
climb the ladder.
Climb the ladder. There you go.
Yeah.
We're saying that may not be what's best.
Yeah. So in some regards, you may be at a larger church, and it might be something worth considering to go to a smaller church. Or you may be at a smaller church, and I'm going to let you determine what's smaller, big, whatever. Okay, so I don't want to get into an argument, but you may be there, and maybe this show will encourage you to see that there's trade-offs with everything, and larger has some benefits to it. And I'm not even going to pretend like you don't learn. So like, let's say your trajectory and what God has led you to do is to be at a church of 200 and then another one at 500 and then another one at 3,000, whatever. You do learn along the way different things that are applicable to the next phase, and that's good. There's a benefit to that. And look, churches of 3,000, they need pastors too. I mean, so that's not bad for you to go from there to there. So that's not what we're saying. But what we are asking is, are there times at which it might be good for you to consider going down the ladder? Not climb the ladder, but maybe just take a step down. What are some of those, Sam? What do we got?
Yeah, there's the idea of fit. So sometimes, let's just be real, you kind of get promoted beyond your ability.
Mm-hmm.
It does happen. And hear me clearly, leading that church of 200 to 300 may be the hardest to lead in terms
Mm.
of, just what is expected of you as a pastor. Sometimes you get to these extremely large churches, and really all that's expected of you is, hey, you just got to be a good communicator, and everyone else will
Mm-hmm.
take care of you don't even, there's no hospital visits. You don't even have
Right.
to know people. You don't even need to know the names of some of your staff.
Right.
There's stories. I've heard stories of some of these. I won't name names, but people who, some of these so-called senior or lead pastors, they walk down the hall and they're like brag about, yeah, I have all this staff. I don't even know their names. Um,
Oh wow.
so yeah, it's kind of wild. That being said, I don't want to imply that smaller churches are easier, or that you have to be a better leader to go to a bigger church. I don't want to imply that.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you do get promoted beyond what you really need to be at. I think it's called the Peter principle, a business principle, where you just one promotion beyond what your real capabilities are, and that's something to consider.
Oh.
Like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it happens, and maybe a smaller church is a better fit for you. So let's start with
Yeah.
ideas of fit.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain pastors that really thrive at that church of 500. They really thrive at that church of 100 or 50 or whatever it is. And I do think every church should grow. But there is this myth of exponential growth. Like, you can't double every year. Statistically, it's
Right.
impossible. Eventually, you'll just reach the whole world, and your church will be the whole world, right? So, let's do away
Right.
with this myth of exponential growth. Every church needs to grow all the time. You can't. Statistically, you can't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, you go to a church of 50. I hope your church does grow. I hope eventually it does get to 100 or 150 or whatever it is over time. But it may be just a better fit for you. I think that's just,
Yeah.
I thrive. I have considered larger churches, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
really doing well at West Bradenton. We average 600 people. I hope we grow beyond that. I'm trying to get through that 700 barrier. Um, and we're going to do it through multi-site, which is a whole other discussion, right? When it comes to the size of the church. But
Mm-hmm.
I do really well in that setting. I feel like I'm a very good fit.
Yeah, there's a book called Breaking Growth Barriers, and I've always recommended it's a great book. However, I think the title's misleading. When I read in fact, I refused to read Breaking Growth Barriers for a long time because I thought it was about like strategies to being a bigger church, and it's really not. What it does is it talks about these natural barriers that are in church sizes, 150, 250, 300, 500, 1000, etc. And one of the interesting points that they point out, which I have since seen in a number of scholarly articles and discussions, is that there is a certain cultural dynamic to group sizes. So, a church of 1,000, let's say a Methodist church of 1,000 in Dallas, Texas, and a Baptist church of 1,000 in Paradise, Florida, they will be very similar churches with the way they act, with their dynamics, because there is a certain group dynamic to it. There's a certain group culture to it. Churches of 50 all over the place are going to be very similar in some dynamics, regardless of denomination and regardless of cultural fit, like where they're located. And so you may be wired, whether it's the way that you were raised, it's your background, it's your baggage, those sort of things. You may be better wired for one of those areas. And so that could be something where you really need to consider it and just go like, to be honest with you, here's a way that I would ask you. If you were not on staff at a church, which churches would you visit? Which churches would you take your family to and visit? I know a lot of people that will not visit my church because they believe it's too big. They just they just don't go to big churches. Well, if that's you and you're on staff at my church, you may not be a good fit. And you may want to consider going down to a smaller church, which could be better in some different regards.
Yeah, and there's just also this emerging reality, which has been emerging really since 2010, 2012, that the biggest churches have kind of stopped getting bigger. The
Mm-hmm.
mega church movement is waning, which means churches in general are getting smaller. So this idea of moving down in size uh, is going to become more common just because there's not as many big churches. There's not as many churches getting bigger right now, which is unfortunate. But
Yeah.
that's certainly the case, which leads us into this next point, which is just a season of ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're retired and
Yeah.
you don't really have any. You've got enough saved. You don't really have any financial needs. I still think, by the way, the church needs to pay you and pay you fairly.
Right.
But it's not something that you need to be concerned about. So really, you could go to any size church or
Mm-hmm.
anywhere. And if you're in a later season of ministry, if you're retired, going down in size may be strategic because you know
Yeah.
how to take that church of 50 and get it to 200. You know how to take that church of
Mm-hmm.
200 and to get it to 500 because you did
Yeah, I
it
was going to
three
say that.
times before.
Right.
So it can be that going down in size, going to a smaller church, is a strategic move because you're just really good at taking those mid-size or smaller churches and helping them grow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and another thing to think about this is there's a bunch of benefits to that all the way around. You're opening up the seat of the larger church for somebody at a different life stage to step into. And so they can, maybe it's a younger person, they've got more years on them. They can take the church that you've helped build by God's grace and God's design uh, down the road for another 20, 30 years, just like you did. You pastored it for 30 years. It was a great time that you went there in your mid 30s. And now this mid 30s is going to step in and help them get to that next level. And here, Sam and I are both not really all that concerned about the number of people. We're much more worried about the health of the church. And so maybe that next person's going to bring in the health of the church. Hey, and I don't even think this is a horrible idea. Let's say you're at the stage where you're like, man, I could retire, but I still got some gas in the tank. I got some stuff like this. Look, take a smaller church in like Steamboat Springs, Colorado. Just beautiful. Great place to retire. You could pastor that church. They can pay you something nice, that sort of stuff, or any number of beautiful like coastal communities in Florida. And you're pouring in, you're investing, you're using the gas that you've got in your tank in a meaningful way. You're not holding back things. You've changed a little bit, or you haven't changed a little bit, but culture and systems and things have. So I think there's a number of ways where a lot of people can benefit from that. I love what you said there. There are some people who are just built to take a church from 150 to 300. That's just what they are good at it. And they're never really great at going from 3 to 500. So maybe that's what you do. You take it to 350, then you go find another church by 150. All of this is assuming that Holy Spirit is guiding you, that God is leading you, that this is not like you've not turned this into a marketable business. That's what we're kind of talking about here.
Yeah, this is every episode, by the way. If you do listen to this regularly, thank you. We're just assuming the Holy Spirit is working appropriately in your life.
Yeah.
So the advice that we give, please just know that not every episode is going to have a disclaimer at the beginning that says we're assuming your theology is good. We're assuming the Holy Spirit is active in your life. We're
Right.
assuming you're a follower of Jesus Christ. So we just talk practically here. By the way,
Mhm.
Steamboat, that was a really good example. I went skiing there this last season. Oh, it's so
Yeah.
nice.
I
What
had
a
a
great town. I
have
mean,
a
Colorado's awesome.
mhm.
I love all of Colorado, but man, Steamboat just it would. We took my daughter skiing for the first time. Now it was negative 37 degrees actual temperature when we got on the mountain, and we got our kids out in that stuff. Our Florida girls, and they handled it like champs. But anyway, I don't know why you thought of that town, but I went there. I
Yeah,
don't know if you
I
know
have a
that, but
friend. I have a friend who pastored there for a while, and it's one of those kind of like retirement community, ski resorts, sort of areas, and it's beautiful. It's just not. It's not. the church he pastored just can't really pay for, a full family and insurance and stuff like that. So I think that moving around is actually good for the kingdom, as long as Holy Spirit is guiding you to do that.
Yeah, there's the caveat, as long as the Spirit leads. So let's talk about geography and community, because some people. I'm a city boy. I
Hmm.
married a country girl, and we compromised on Bradenton. I absolutely love Florida.
Hmm.
If God said you're never allowed to leave the state ever again, I would say praise the Lord. I don't have to go anywhere else.
Hmm.
So I feel like, at least in my calling, Southwest Florida, I grew up in St. Pete. Man, like I'm home. This is where I fit. I love this place.
Yeah.
And for me, church is a huge part of it, of course, but community and geography is also a key part as well. So you may go, well, I'm at a church of 1,000 people, which is an
Hmm.
extremely large church. I'm going to go to this church of 300 because I know this community. I love this community. This is, this opening, this church opening, and me going there is like, man, this is what I feel my calling is.
Hmm.
So you may go to a smaller church simply because you feel called to that community, or you feel called to that culture, or that particular geography.
Yeah.
What say you, King Josh?
Yeah, I just think you learn over time. You take different positions, you take different pastorates, and some of those don't work out well. Like you're in a spot and you look around and go, "This, I thought it was something different." Those kind of things. And so for me, where I am now, I am blessed to serve in a college town. In fact, the nickname is City of Colleges. We have 3 universities here, and I've just seen that is part of my wheelhouse. So I don't know that I could ever take a church, or I would never want to. God lead where He wants, but I wouldn't want to take a church that's not near a university, that's not near college students, because it's just something that God has gifted both Jackie and I to do. So I could see somebody who, let's say that they were like pastoring like a place like mine. They take a call somewhere else, but then they're like, you know what? There's no college students here, and I now realize that that's a cultural element that God has gifted me to reach, that I feel energized by, I feel renewed by, and so I'm going to go and do that. There's so many different cultural aspects that often, very often, people don't take into consideration, and you later on find it out. And so I just I talk to guys all the time that are looking, they're searching for churches and all this kind of stuff, and they just like, well, I'm at a church of 200, so I'm only looking at churches larger than 350 because I feel. And to be honest with you, that's fine. I guess that's kind of a natural
Yeah,
step,
I'd
but
say
maybe
a
not.
lot of people. I think a lot of people do that. I mean,
Yeah,
and it's not
but you don't
necessarily
have to.
wrong.
Hmm.
That's the point of this episode. Yeah, is hey, it's not for everybody.
Yeah,
Um,
because what I would another thing that I would encourage you to think through is this. I know of churches that are 1,000 that are in communities that are in massive decline. That church is not going to be 1,000 very soon. Or once you start talking to the people, you realize this church that's running 700, but 500 of them drive over 30 minutes to get there. That church will not stay that size for very long. I'm telling you, you are taking a smaller church if you go to that church of 700. It's just you've got to think through other dynamics. And so if let's say you're pastoring a church of 200 and you have on your plate two options. One church is of 300, but it has cultural or some sort of demographic statistics that means it's going to decline. Or there's this church on the bleeding edge of some exploding suburb that's running 100, man, I would say really consider the one of 100 because the potential's there. And you've pastored 200, you know how to get it to that point, you know what you're needing to do. And so a lot of times it may be more beneficial to trade off size for potential or size for culture, community. Maybe you're into the outdoors and you're currently serving in Boston. All right. So you don't get to do a lot of outdoor stuff, I assume. I don't know much about Boston other than it gets cold a lot of times. But you want to go to Phoenix or Tucson or something like that. You can do a lot more outdoor stuff there. So, those are things that I think you could consider. I just want to kind of break the stigma, at least for our listeners, that small is somehow bad. It's got its challenges, but big has its challenges.
yeah, it's the stigma of small is certainly going away, and it needed to, frankly. Um, and stigma of being bivocational is going away, and that needed to go away,
Yeah.
because we need all different kinds of pastors and all different kinds of churches, and we want every church to be healthy. We want every pastor to be healthy. The last thing that I'll say is that larger churches can also be less flexible. Don't think that just because it's some giant church that and it's got
Mm-hmm.
this perfect leadership structure that, hey, you're going to be able to do what you want to do. I'll say this: typically, those churches are like giant, aircraft carriers. They can
Yeah.
turn, but they're turning really, really slowly. And I think a lot of people look at those big churches and they think that the pastor is going to, even if it's structurally the pastor has a lot of authority, you can do whatever you want to do. Man, getting that many people to accept change, good luck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The larger churches actually tend to be less flexible. There was a
Yeah.
study that was done, and I found this fascinating, just released the last couple of days, and Baptist Press reported on it because it was done through one of our seminaries, about how you actually find more variety of music at smaller churches than you do larger churches. And the larger
Hmm.
churches tend to sing the same songs, and then there's certain tribes that they all mimic each other. I won't name
Yeah.
names.
Yeah.
Ark. Um, they all mimic each other. And to go into one is to go into any of them, and they all look the same. It's like mixed church.
Mm-hmm.
So I will just say this: larger churches can be less flexible, tend to be less flexible than smaller churches. And variety is actually greater in smaller
Mm-hmm.
churches. And it's not just worship music, but just about anything, programs included. Variety is actually greater in smaller churches. So if you're looking for variety and flexibility, you're more likely to find it in a smaller church than a larger church. Now, of course, you may say
Yeah.
these smaller churches are smaller for a reason and they've been stuck in the mud. Okay, that's true. Yes, there's plenty of small churches that are small for a reason. I'm just talking in generalities here.
Mm-hmm.
The smaller churches tend to be more flexible, not less.
I absolutely agree. One of the principles that people need to remember is what got you to where you are is not what will get you to the next spot. Usually, you need to change and adapt to get to the next level of whatever. That's true, but what we're talking about here is maybe your wiring and your gift set. And your gift set maybe, let's say that you are a creative and you're always thinking outside of the box and you thrive on fast moving change. Okay. So I wouldn't go to Deep East Texas large 1,200, 2,000 person church. That's just not in the culture. Fast, constant change. It's also something large like that is not going to move real quick. So something in Miami that runs 100, they're going to be moving a lot faster typically. Now, of course, there could be a church in Miami of 100 that just they're stuck. But that's what I'm saying is all of these factors are the way that God built you, the season that that church is in. That may be a better role, and so don't think that you're getting demoted somehow if you accept a position that is numerically smaller. That's also just a really poor plumb line. Don't use just the metrics of size to base things on.
Yeah, poor plumb lines, man. That's a really. I know you just kind of pulled that out of your butt, but it's really good.
This
It's
is a
really, really
family
good.
show. You can't say but.
Oh man, if I said everything that's in my brain, I'd get in
Yeah.
so much trouble.
Right.
Well, thanks again for tuning in to today's episode. Really appreciate our listeners. We need to thank you who listen to this more, because the show's for you.
Yeah.
If you have ideas for a show, send it. Josh and I are fairly accessible on the Twitters. I'm on Threads now,
Me
so
too.
connect with me on Threads.
Are we threaded?
Um, yeah, it's this new thing. It just came out, and okay, let's try
Yeah.
it.
I like it.
So yeah, send us a message or what have you. I don't see every private message, but I try to. I get a lot of them. But if you've got an idea for a show, shoot us an idea. We're here
Mhm.
for you. So if many of our ideas have come from listeners. So feel free to do that. And I want to thank Church Answers for being our other sponsor, along with Church Teams. So again, you can get the Church Teams offer at est.church. We've also got a bookstore at Church Answers. So go to churchanswers.com, click on the bookstore link. Would love for you to peruse what we have to offer. We've got some really good curated content there that we would love for, hey, I'll admit, we'd love for you to make a purchase through the Church Answers bookstore. So
Mhm.
we've been delivering digital products to you for many years. Now we can deliver physical products to your door. So appreciate you guys. Josh, sign us out.
Yeah, I was just checking to make sure that you are following me on Threads, and you are. So thank you. I appreciate that. And
Yes, you were one of the first people I followed.
yeah, I know. I'm an early adopter. I would encourage all of you to follow us on Threads so we can get rid of Twitter. So thank you so much for following. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe. And like Sam said, let us know your show ideas. We need those. Thank you. We'll catch you next week.